Every couple of weeks, the doorbell rang. You heard those two chimes from the kitchen, and you did not even have to look. You already knew who it was. Same woman, same smile, same bag full of catalogs and little sample bottles she would line up on your kitchen counter one by one. She knew your name, she knew what lipstick shade you wore, she remembered your daughter's birthday and slipped a little something extra into a pastel box. Half the women in the neighborhood were on a first-name basis with her. She was your Avon Lady, and honestly, most of them looked forward to her showing up more than they would ever admit. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. So how did this whole thing start? With a guy who could not sell books. David McConnell was a door-to-door book salesman in New York City, 1886. He would show up at people's houses with a stack of books nobody wanted and a little glass vial of rose perfume he gave away free just to get women to open the door and listen to his pitch. A clever trick, actually, except the women did not care about the books. They wanted the perfume. Every single house, the same thing. They would smile, flip through a few pages to be nice, and then ask, "So you got any more of that fragrance?" McConnell finally took the hint. He dropped the books entirely and started the California Perfume Company out of a tiny office on Chambers Street in Manhattan. The year was 1886, and he had no idea what he had just started. McConnell figured out pretty quick that he, a man, probably was not the ideal person to sell perfume to housewives. So in 1886, he did something almost nobody else was doing. He hired a woman to do the selling. Her name was Persis Albee. She was 50 years old, a wife, and a mother of two. Mrs. Albee rode a horse and buggy and later trains, going door to door across the Northeast, selling perfume and recruiting other women to do the same thing. In 12 years, she trained over 5,000 sales representatives, every single one of them a woman. Think about that for a second. This was 34 years before women could even vote in this country. And Mrs. Albee was out there running a multi-state sales operation, making her own money, answering to nobody. She was the first Avon Lady. The company would not actually be called Avon until 1929. They named it after Shakespeare's birthplace, Stratford-upon-Avon, which is kind of a fancy name for a perfume company run out of New York. But the model Mrs. Albee built, women selling to women, face-to-face, at the kitchen table, on the front porch, sometimes while the kids played in the next room. That is the model that ran for over 100 years. Fast forward to the 1950s. More than 250,000 women were working as Avon representatives, the biggest female sales force on the planet. And in 1954, the company rolled out an ad campaign that pretty much everyone over the age of 50 still has stuck in their head. Ding dong, Avon Calling. They ran it for 13 straight years. The ads showed these nicely dressed women showing up at suburban front doors with catalogs full of lipstick and perfume and face cream. And the genius of it wasn't really an ad for products. It was an ad for a feeling. A friendly face at the door. Someone you knew, someone from the neighborhood popping by to brighten up your Tuesday afternoon. And people bought it because that's exactly what it was. The Avon Lady showed up every 2 weeks with a fresh catalog. 150 pages, full color, and if you pressed your nose into the pages, you could actually smell the perfume samples they tucked between them. She would sit at your kitchen table while you flipped through it. She would point out what was new. If your daughter was about to turn 16, she would suggest Sweet Honesty, this light, powdery cologne that practically every teenage girl in America wore in the 70s. It came in these little novelty bottles shaped like lambs and kittens. My sister had a white lamb on her dresser for years. For a lot of girls, that was their first real perfume. And the Avon Lady was the one who picked it out. Your husband had no idea what to buy you for your birthday? The Avon Lady took care of that too. perfume lockets, brooches you could open up and find solid fragrance inside, dusting powder in a sky blue tin with white lovebirds on the lid, soap shaped like little animals in pastel wrapping with gold trim. Too pretty to actually use, so it just sat in a dish in the guest bathroom for the next decade. For the men, they made cologne in novelty bottles shaped like vintage cars, chess pieces, even little eagles. Dad might have laughed about it, but that car-shaped bottle of Brut sat on his dresser for 20 years. She also knew when you were running low on skin so soft, that bath oil that somehow also kept the mosquitoes away. Nobody at Avon ever marketed it as bug repellent. They did not have to. Every woman in the neighborhood already knew if you were going camping, going fishing, or just sitting on the porch on a summer night, somebody was going to pull out a bottle of Skin So Soft. And those catalogs on kitchen tables across the country, Avon was printing 800 million of them a year. In 2005, someone ran the numbers, and Avon turned out to be the second largest publisher in the United States, right behind TV Guide. Let that sink in. Now, for a lot of the women carrying that Avon bag, this was not some side hustle. This was the first real money they ever made. In the 50s and 60s, most women did not work outside the home. The ones who did were teachers or nurses or secretaries, and even that came with side-eye in a lot of communities. Being an Avon lady was different. You were your own boss, set your own schedule, walk the kids to school at 8, ring doorbells until 2, have dinner ready by 5. The commission was 10% on small orders, up to 50% if you really moved product. That is not going to make you rich. But for a woman in 1962 who had never had a paycheck with her own name on it, that first Avon check meant she could buy her daughter a birthday present without asking her husband for the money. That meant something. The growth was wild. From those first 12 women Mrs. Albee recruited in the 1880s to over 6 million representatives selling in more than 100 countries by the early 70s. Revenue crossed $1 billion in 1972. By 2011, $11.3 billion. Avon was one of the original Fortune 500 companies. It was the 14th biggest beauty company in the world and the second largest direct selling operation on the planet. 6.4 million women ringing doorbells in 100 countries, all because some guy in 1886 could not sell books. And this was not just a white suburban thing either. Avon was late to figure it out, but by the 70s, they had actually become a leader in hiring and promoting minority workers. In 1970, they ran their first ad campaign aimed at African American consumers. In 1975, they launched shades of beauty, makeup, skincare, and hair care made specifically for Black women. They put 2 women on the board of directors in the 70s, way before most companies even considered it. In a lot of Black families, the Avon Lady was a tradition passed down through generations. Grandmothers sold it. Their daughters grew up on it. Their granddaughters became reps themselves. One woman who started selling in 1992 said her great-aunt had been the first Black Avon representative in their town and kept at it for over 50 years. If you have ever seen Edward Scissorhands, you already know the Avon Lady made it to Hollywood. Tim Burton's 1990 movie opens with Diane Wiest as Peg Boggs, a suburban Avon representative who cannot make a sale to save her life. She goes door to door in a pastel cookie-cutter neighborhood, gets turned down at every house, and finally drives up the hill to a creepy old mansion nobody goes near. Inside, she finds Johnny Depp with scissors for hands, and she takes him home. Peg Boggs is the warmest, most trusting character in the entire movie, and she is an Avon lady. Burton chose that on purpose. In 1990, if you wanted to show the friendliest, most harmless woman in a suburban neighborhood, you made her an Avon representative. Everybody knew what that meant. But by the time that movie came out, the real Avon lady was already in trouble. Women went to work, and that changed everything. In the early 70s, about 52% of working-age women had jobs. By the 2000s, that was over 70%. And when nobody's home during the day, nobody answers the doorbell. Avon tried to pivot. In 1986, they switched the pitch from door-to-door to what they called door-to-desk, selling at workplaces instead. That bought them some time. But the bigger issue was that the whole reason the Avon Lady existed was because women could not easily get to a store. She brought the store to you. Once women were commuting to work, swinging by the mall, and eventually ordering off the internet, they did not need her anymore. Then Avon's corporate leadership made it worse. In the 80s, they tried to branch out into healthcare, magazines, and retirement properties, and it all blew up in their face. They lost over $500 million just unwinding the healthcare business, and they racked up over $1 billion in debt. Amway and Mary Kay both tried to buy the company. The company barely survived. In 1999, Andrea Young became CEO, the first woman to run the company. She was a second-generation Chinese immigrant who spoke Mandarin and Cantonese. She was supposed to fix everything. She cranked the advertising budget from $63 million to $400 million. She launched new products and pushed hard into Brazil and China. But the supply chain fell apart. Shipments were delayed, products ran out, and representatives were promising customers things they could not deliver. Customers got annoyed and canceled. The representatives became demoralized and quit. The whole thing began feeding on itself. And the numbers just kept getting uglier. In 2011, $11.3 billion in revenue. In 2014, North American sales dropped 18% in 1 year. In 2016, Avon sold off its entire United States and Canadian business. In 2018, they shut down operations in Australia and New Zealand. 21,400 representatives gone overnight. Revenue went from $11 billion to $8 billion, then $5 billion, then $2.8 billion by 2022. And in August 2024, Avon Products filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, not just because of bad sales either. TALC, hundreds of lawsuits started pouring in, claiming that Avon's powders and cosmetics, the same stuff women had been putting on their faces for decades, contained traces of asbestos. A company that built everything on trust, on a woman handing you a product in your living room and telling you it was safe, was now getting hit with cancer claims. A jury in Arizona awarded $52 million to a woman who developed mesothelioma after using Avon products most of her life. A jury in Chicago awarded $24 million to a janitor who worked in an Avon factory in the 1980s. By the time of the bankruptcy filing, the company had burned through $225 million in legal fees and settlements. 380 lawsuits were still pending. Out in Spokane, Washington, a longtime Avon representative finally hung it up. She had been selling for years. Her customers were older now, many of them did not own a computer, and most were living on fixed incomes. She had sold to mothers and then to their daughters. She used to set up her leads through switchboard operators at the phone company. That's how long she'd been doing this. The corporate office told her the future was digital. No more ding-dong, they said. Now it's click-click. But her customers didn't click. They waited for the doorbell, and nobody was ringing it anymore. That's the part you won't find in any earnings report. It's not the revenue graphs or the bankruptcy paperwork or the legal settlements. It's the woman in Spokane who knew her customers by name and showed up at their door every other Tuesday for 15 years. The grandmother who patted Rapture dusting powder on her shoulders every night before putting on her housecoat. The teenage girl who got handed her first bottle of sweet honesty by the Avon Lady and walked around smelling like she was finally grown up. The single mom who figured out that selling Avon was the one thing she could do on her own time in her own way and still keep the lights on. You can still buy Avon products online. The website works, the brand's not dead, but the visit is the doorbell, the catalog spread open on the kitchen table with a cup of coffee next to it. The woman who came by every other week and somehow made you feel like a valued customer and a friend at the same time. She wasn't a pop-up ad. She wasn't a recommendation algorithm. She was a person who walked up your front steps and said your name. 6.4 million women used to do that. They sold lipstick and perfume and little soaps shaped like animals in pastel boxes. They also sold something you can't put in a catalog. A reason to open the door, a few minutes of company in the middle of a quiet afternoon. And for millions of women who never had an office or a title or a business card, ringing that doorbell was the closest thing to a career anyone ever offered them. Nobody rings that bell anymore, and most people don't even notice it's gone. But if you remember the catalog, the samples, the little bottles lined up on the bathroom shelf, you know what disappeared. It wasn't a product, it was a person, and she's not coming back. If this brought something back, I'd love to hear it. Did you have an Avon Lady growing up? Was your mom or grandmother one? Tell me in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. Thanks for watching.